My name is Ricky, and I live in California. This story happened 2 years ago. At that time, I had to drop out of college because I couldn't afford the tuition. To make ends meet, I got a job working in a supermarket warehouse. I rented a room in an old boarding house, sharing the space with another college student to save money. The first few days were pretty quiet. I worked shifts, so I still had time to rest and hang out with friends. The house seemed normal enough until I started noticing the landlady. After being there for a few weeks, I ran into her more often. She was around my mother's age, thin, with eyes that always seemed to be watching everything very closely. I noticed that whenever we spoke, she would stare at me for a long time, which made me feel awkward. She often commented that I was too skinny and needed to eat more. I just laughed it off, thinking she was just a caring landlord. About a month into my stay, she started bringing me food. These were always home-cooked meals. At first, it was just a few times a week, but soon it was almost every day. What surprised me was how well she remembered exactly what I liked to eat, even though I'd only mentioned it in passing. She would often stand there and watch me eat, asking if it tasted good. She also started acting very familiar with me, like touching my shoulder or fixing my collar. These movements felt very natural to her. At first, I didn't think much of it. I actually felt grateful, like I was being looked after by a mother figure. But that feeling didn't last long. Her attention started to become obsessive. She would constantly ask where I was going, who I was with, and what time I'd be back. If I said I was going out with friends, she would grill me for details about them. One time, she caught me getting ready to head out with a close friend. When he politely said hello to her, her expression turned cold and resentful. That night, when I got home, she ambushed me with aggressive questions about my friend, making me feel extremely uncomfortable. The line was officially crossed when she started entering my room without permission while I was out. At first, she claimed she was just cleaning. Then, she started doing my laundry, including my underwear. I only realized this when I found my clothes folded with unusual neatness. It really creeped me out. The breaking point came on a day I felt sick. I left work early and went back to my room in the afternoon. When I opened the door, I froze. She was standing in the middle of my room. She looked at me perfectly calm. I was angry and asked what she was doing there, but she ignored my reaction. Instead, she walked up to me and placed her hand on my forehead. She kept it there for a long time, staring at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I backed away to show I was uncomfortable, but she got annoyed, saying I was only sick because I hadn't been eating the food she cooked for me. After that, I decided to be blunt. I told her clearly that I didn't want her in my room and that she needed to respect my privacy. She stared at me without blinking. It was obvious she heard me, but she didn't really respond. I will never forget the hollow, blank look in her eyes during that confrontation. Despite my warning, she kept acting the same way. Since I didn't have enough money to move out, I was forced to stay, even though I felt a constant sense of dread. The next disturbing thing happened when my roommate moved out. It seemed like the landlady had arranged it. She told me that living alone would be better and that no one would bother me anymore. I was truly terrified, but I had no other choice. From then on, I lived in a state of total avoidance. I tried to come home as late as possible, avoided her at all costs, and always made sure my door was locked tight. One night, I came home late and was exhausted. I just wanted to crash. As I lay down, I heard a faint creak coming from under the bed, but I was so tired I didn't give it much thought and quickly fell fast asleep. I don't know how much time passed, but in a half-dreaming state, I felt a cold sensation on the top of my head and something sliding through my hair. I woke up completely, and what I saw made my heart stop. The landlady was sitting right next to my bed. One hand was rhythmically stroking my hair while the other hand held a large kitchen knife. She had a twisted smile on her face, and her eyes were wide and bulging. She had been petting my hair. She had been inches away from me, and God knows for how long. I used every bit of strength I had to bolt upright, lunge out of the room, and run straight outside. I called 911 while I ran, my voice cracking from pure terror. The police arrived fast. They searched the room, tackled her, and took her away. I was in shock for days. Later, the police investigation revealed the whole truth. It turns out the landlady had a son about my age. He had been a victim of severe bullying for a long time and eventually took his own life. His death caused her to have a total mental breakdown. When she met me, because I looked a bit like her son, she began to see me as him. The medical staff added that her fingertips had thick calluses and her nails were worn down and tilted to one side. These were signs of repetitive touching and stroking over a long period. It wasn't accidental. It was a compulsive habit that had become part of her physical nature. Her murderous intent actually started that afternoon when she saw me and my best friend joking around. We were shoving each other's shoulders and using typical guy slang. In her warped mind, she believed I was being bullied, just like her son had been. Fearing I would do something drastic, she came up with a horrific plan. She was going to kill my friend to protect me. That night, she had taken a knife and crawled under my bed hours earlier. She had been lying there patiently, waiting for the right moment to kill my friend. Luckily, my friend didn't stay over that night and went straight home instead. When she saw I was alone, she crawled out from under the bed and sat there, mesmerized, watching me sleep with the weapon in her hand. If my friend had stayed that night, a gruesome murder would have definitely happened. After it was over, I moved out immediately, but I still live in a state of high alert. My life is constantly filled with stress and exhaustion. Even now, 2 years later, I can still feel that cold hand stroking my hair in the dark. My name is Jordan, and I'm 35 years old. 2 years ago, my life hit rock bottom. I was suddenly laid off from my job. I wasn't prepared at all, and I didn't have a backup plan. In the days that followed, I survived on small unemployment checks from the state. I fell into a dark, empty headspace. My family is just me and my mother. We only have each other to lean on. My mom was in her 60s at the time, but she was blessed with a very youthful look. If she didn't tell people her age, everyone assumed she was only in her early 50s. She had owned and operated a small diner for over 10 years. Around the time I lost my job, my mom started suffering from back pain. I realized I couldn't keep living without a purpose while she worked so hard, so I decided to help her run the diner. I reorganized my mom's work schedule. Every day I had her go home to rest around 9 p.m. I would stay behind to clean up, balance the books, prep ingredients for the next day, and lock up the shop around 10 p.m. Everything went smoothly until one particular night. At about 9 p.m., an old man around 70 years old walked in. Since it was almost closing time, I initially refused to serve him, but he walked up to the counter and told me he was having a bad day and just wanted to buy a single bottle of beer. Maybe because I was going through a hard time myself, I felt bad for people who looked lonely. I agreed and grabbed the beer for him. After receiving the beer, he didn't leave right away. He sat down at a table near the counter and suddenly invited me to have a drink with him. I politely declined, saying I still had work to do. He stared at me for a moment, gave a cold smile, and didn't say another word. Near 10 p.m., he politely said goodbye and left, but his beer was still almost full. From that day on, he showed up every single night. The thing that started to feel weird was that he always arrived exactly when my mother left the diner. Every time he came in, he ordered just one beer, sat in the same spot, and always asked me to drink with him. I always said no, and he would just stare at me. That look, It was very uncomfortable. It wasn't exactly angry, but it was cold, like he was judging or studying me. I began to feel uneasy, but I just thought he was a lonely man who had a bit too much to drink and acted strangely because of it. Then came one night when he walked into the diner as usual, but he didn't order a beer right away. He stood at the counter and looked me straight in the eye. This time, his gaze was different. It was terrifyingly sharp and cold. "Do you know why I come here at this exact time every night?" he asked. I was a bit taken off guard by the question. I shook my head and told him I didn't know. Immediately, his face changed. He suddenly flew into a rage. His voice got much louder, and he demanded that I serve him a beer. The shift was so fast I didn't have time to react. I just figured he had mental health issues or was drunk. So I turned my back to get the beer just to end the interaction. But the moment I turned around, a sharp pain suddenly slammed into my back. My body stumbled forward. When I turned back, I saw him pulling his hand back after punching me. He didn't stop there. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a knife. Everything happened in just a few seconds. He lunged at me with a twisted smile on his lips and screamed with pure hatred, "If you just disappear, I'll finally be happy." He swung the knife wildly, and I couldn't dodge in time. I felt a cold sting as the blade tore through the skin on my shoulder and back. Warm blood immediately started to soak through my clothes. I gritted my teeth and ran out, pressing my hand against the wound to stop the bleeding. I asked the person on the street to call the police for me. A few minutes later, the police and an ambulance arrived, but I only wanted a quick bandage so I could go back to the diner with the officers. I was terrified that if I didn't return, my mom would come looking for me and run into him. When I went back with the police, I was shocked to see him still sitting there, as calm as if nothing had happened. The knife was gone from his hand, but his eyes were the same. When he saw me, he jumped up and yelled in anger, "I thought I made you leave!" The police immediately tackled and arrested him. After that, an investigation began, and the truth slowly came to light. It turned out he had been watching my mother for a long time. He often visited the diner during the day when I wasn't there and tried to flirt with her many times. My mother, of course, rejected him and kept her distance. Once she had told him directly, "My son is here now, please don't do this." To a normal person, that was just a polite way to say no. But to a twisted mind like his, those words were understood in a completely different way. He believed that my existence was the only thing stopping him from being with my mother. Therefore, he decided he had to get rid of me. What came out next was even scarier than I imagined. During the interrogation, he confessed that all those previous times he invited me to drink beer were part of a plan to kill me. He had secretly put cyanide in the beer bottles, but because I always refused, his plan failed. Finally, he switched to a direct method: intimidation, assault, and if necessary, murder. I was truly stunned. I had been so close to death without even knowing it. If I had been soft-hearted just once and agreed to drink with him, things would have ended very differently. For him, the story ended with a prison sentence, but for me and my mom, it was the opposite. The small diner had become a place of terrifying memories. What worried us most was that one day he might come back after finishing his time in prison. Ultimately, my mother and I made a difficult choice. We left everything behind. We sold the diner, packed what we needed, and moved to another state to start over. By now, things have settled down. I have a new job, and my mother doesn't have to work so hard anymore. The one bittersweet thing is that she gets very scared now whenever someone tells her she looks young and beautiful. I'm a single woman, 30 years old, working at a small company in Houston. My life's pretty uneventful, just kinda quiet. I'm not really a loud or social person, and most evenings after work are just me having dinner alone and watching a favorite movie or reading a book. I left work at 8, like always. It was colder than I expected, the March wind sneaking through my thick coat. bringing that damp smell of dry leaves scattered on the sidewalk. I pulled up my collar and hurried to the bus stop, digging around my pocket for my keys. My fingers brushed against something soft and thin, a small piece of paper folded in half. I opened it up, and there was just one number inside, 30. I frowned. Who would even do this? But honestly, I was too tired to care. Standing next to a public trash can, I dropped the paper in and headed home. The next morning, as I got off the bus and walked toward the office, I absent-mindedly stuck my hand in my pocket, a familiar feeling. I pulled out another piece of paper, 29. My heart skipped a beat. This time I stopped, just staring at the number. It felt kind of weird, but I brushed it off. Must be someone messing with me. That's what I told myself, but I couldn't shake this strange feeling growing inside me. In the days that followed, numbers like 28, 27, 26 kept showing up in my pocket, one after another. I started feeling uneasy. How the hell were these pieces of paper showing up like this? I started checking my pockets every day, turning them inside out before leaving the house. But nothing changed. I changed the locks, installed a security camera, even bought a gun for protection and kept it under my pillow. But that didn't change a thing. I kept finding the notes, each one closer, more unsettling every day. I was getting more and more anxious, trying to figure it out, but coming up empty. Every time I went out, I kept looking around, eyeing every passerby like they might be the one messing with me. Was someone doing this to me on purpose? One weekend morning, I didn't go to work, and the note wasn't in my pocket this time. I found it in my mailbox. Number 3. Someone knew where I lived. I looked around, panicked, feeling helpless, and like I couldn't breathe. When I got inside, my mind wouldn't stop racing with 1,000 questions. What the hell was going on? I had to call the police, but what could I even tell them? What proof did I have? I ran into the bathroom, gripping the door to steady myself, because it felt like my body was about to give out. My mind was a mess, and the only thing looping over and over in my head was numbers. I didn't want to see them anymore. Not again. I turned on the faucet, letting the cold water run over my face, hoping it would calm me down. My hands shook as the cold water hit them, but it didn't clear my head. The fear still clung to me like a ghost, hanging in the air, drowning out every other feeling. I stood up and looked in the mirror in front of me, and there it was, the number 2. My eyes widened, and this crushing feeling of despair hit me. No way out. No escape. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, like it was closing in on me. I couldn't take it anymore. I held my head, my hands tangled in my messy hair, like I just wanted to tear myself away from all of this. And I screamed, a desperate, helpless cry for help. Someone was out there, watching from a distance, and I was just a piece in their messed up game. I called Maggie out of breath, begging to crash at her place for a few days. I told her everything. She thought I was just burned out from work. Maggie promised she'd always have my back and would call the police if anything happened. But even with Maggie's reassuring smile, I couldn't shake the anxiety. The days I spent at Maggie's apartment felt like a much-needed break. Every morning when I woke up, those pieces of paper, those creepy numbers, were gone. Maggie was always there, talking with me, having coffee together, and in those moments, I slowly started to feel a little more at peace. After a few days, I knew I had to go home. I needed to grab some important documents, and I couldn't keep relying on Maggie forever. But part of me still felt uneasy, so I asked Maggie to come with me. When we got near my door, there was a piece of paper stuck to it. This time, it was the number 1 right in the middle of a target symbol. I froze, my heart pounding, fear flooding over me. All those awful memories came rushing back. Maggie, I whispered, my voice shaky, squeezing her hand without even realizing it. Maggie looked at the paper and smiled. "Don't stress too much. Everything's fine. We'll just grab your documents and get out of here." I tried to grab her hand, but she just looked at me, sighed, and opened the door. The moment the door opened, it felt like time stopped. Then a loud noise. My whole body tensed up. Numbness and confusion swallowed me. Everything felt blurry, unreal. I saw Maggie collapse to the floor, bright red blood quickly soaking into the carpet beneath her. A bullet right in the middle of her forehead, her eyes still wide open. Frozen in shock, I couldn't move, couldn't say a word. The only sound in the room was my shaky, ragged breathing that wouldn't stop. I called the police, telling them everything, from the weird numbers on the pieces of paper to Maggie's death. They brought me in to give a statement at the station. When I walked into the interrogation room, the bright lights made it hard to see anyone's face. Everything felt hazy, unfamiliar. I sat down, clutching my head, my eyes red and swollen from crying. My words came out in broken pieces, and sometimes I even laughed this strange, unsettling laugh, like the panic had completely taken over. The police kept asking me about the weird stuff, the numbers, Maggie, but all I could do was repeat myself, crying and laughing, totally lost. It felt like I was stuck in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Finally, I stared straight at the detective taking notes and said, my voice sharp but oddly unfamiliar, "I have found a substitute." A faint, unsettling smile crept across my face, even though I didn't understand why. The whole room went silent, everything suddenly still. Just me, and those damn pieces of paper that wouldn't leave me alone. I can still picture that night, freezing cold, right after Thanksgiving, when the empty highway turned into the last place I ever wanted to be. Leaving my grandma's house after a long day with family, my coat still smelled like turkey, pumpkin pie, and apple cider. It was pitch dark, and the only thing lighting up the road ahead was my headlights, casting shaky shadows of the trees. The suburban Pennsylvania roads felt weirdly quiet, like the later it got, the more it became its own little world. I didn't even notice my mistake. Somehow my gas tank had hit empty before I had a clue. I grumbled under my breath, half scolding myself, half hoping my car would magically make it to a gas station. Just when I thought I might be in the clear, the engine sputtered, coughed, and then dead silence. The car rolled a few more feet before giving up completely. I was completely stuck with no clue what to do. I wasn't about to call anyone for help. I just had to figure this one out on my own. I made up my mind to walk to the nearest gas station. I locked the car, shoved the key in my pocket, and stepped out. I looked around, dead silent, almost too quiet. The only sound was my footsteps crunching against the road. The flashlight on my phone barely lit up the path, just enough to see where I was going in the freezing night. The road felt endless. I checked my watch. Every minute dragged on like forever. The wind howled past my ears, trees casting shaky shadows in the dark, making everything feel even more off. A truck pulled up right next to me. The window slid down, and a middle-aged guy leaned out. The headlights hit his face, gaunt, tired-looking eyes, and a scruffy beard that hadn't seen a razor in ages. "Need a ride?" His voice was rough, like he hadn't spoken in a while. I shook my head, thanked him, and said I was almost at the gas station. He smiled. Something about it felt off. "It's freezing, and that's a long walk. Come on, hop in. I'll get you there in no time." I hesitated, but he kept insisting, saying it was far and not safe to be walking alone this late. I started second-guessing myself. After a few seconds of debating, I figured a quick ride would get me out of this mess faster. Inside the truck, the thick smell of cigarettes and engine oil hit me, making my stomach turn. He flicked on the radio, but instead of music or news, all I heard was static. Then he started mumbling. I couldn't make out much, but every now and then I caught words like God, salvation, and sin. I tried to stay calm, locking my eyes on where the gas station lights should be, but all I saw was darkness.
The thick, uneasy silence in the truck stretched on for probably around 10 minutes. Then I spotted the gas station up ahead, and relief washed over me. But instead of pulling in, he drove right past it. I tried to stay positive. Maybe he just didn't notice it. "Hey, you just passed it." I tried to sound casual, but my voice was tight. He didn't answer. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, and the truck started picking up speed. "Shut up." His voice was low, sharp, almost a growl. "You're gonna do exactly what I tell you." A wave of cold fear crashed over me. I darted a glance at the door handle, yanked on it, locked. I turned to look at him, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I don't want any trouble. Just stop the car and let me go." He sneered, eyes flashing with something unhinged. "You don't get it. This isn't about what you want." I knew I couldn't wait. As the truck turned a corner, I saw my chance. With everything I had, I swung and punched him square in the face. He let out a scream, the truck swerved, and we crashed straight into a ditch. I slammed hard against the door. When the dust settled, I saw him slumped over the steering wheel, completely out cold. I didn't waste a second. Ignoring the pain, I kicked at the door over and over, shoving it with everything I had. Finally, it burst open, and I took off, sprinting down the dark road, too scared to even glance back. After what felt like an eternity, I spotted the glow of the gas station up ahead. I stumbled inside, gasping for air, barely able to get a word out as the clerk stared at me, wide-eyed. All I could manage was, "Please, call the cops." The police showed up and found the guy still slumped over in the truck, completely out. Turned out, he had a history of mental illness. This wasn't his first time causing trouble. I was lucky to get away, but that night never really left me. Every time I drove down that highway, I could feel it, like someone was watching me from the shadows, their cold stare cutting through the windshield. And I promised myself, never again, no matter what, would I ever take a ride from a stranger.
Special candies for Halloween night. I haven't eaten candy since I was 7 years old. I don't like anything that is small and round like candies, if not to say I'm afraid of them. I'm so afraid that just seeing them makes me feel nauseous instantly. On Halloween occasions, I book a flight to travel abroad. I go to places where Halloween isn't celebrated and stay there for a few weeks or even a whole month. I only return home after making a phone call to ensure that there are no Halloween decorations left. It all started 15 years ago on Halloween, when I was 7 years old. My neighborhood had Joyce, Kane, and Roger. We were in the same class and were very close friends. That Halloween night, I was so excited that I skipped dinner, wore the witch costume my mother had prepared, held a wicker basket in my hand, and ran all around the house. Will I be able to eat all the candies I collected? Of course, sweetheart, but not all at once. Remember to say thank you after you get the candies. My mother gently tied the witch's hat and reminded me. "Otis," Kane's voice called out loudly. I happily said goodbye to my parents and ran over to my friends, ready for the most unforgettable Halloween night of my life. We started by visiting the brightly lit houses in the neighborhood, one by one. "Trick or treat," everyone shouted in unison, the familiar phrase. After visiting about 4 or 5 houses, seeing the small amount of candy in my basket, I came up with an idea. Let's split up. Instead of dividing the candy equally among the 4 of us, we can have all the candy go to just one person. Great, Joyce immediately chimed in. Let's see who can collect the most candy, Kane exclaimed excitedly. And so we split up and agreed to meet at the end of the block. After a while, my candy basket felt noticeably heavier. Looking at the amount of candy, which was everything I had dreamed of getting whenever we went to the supermarket, I couldn't help but smile. After visiting a few more houses, I was confident that I would be the winner. Joyce and Kane were waiting at the meeting spot. I ran over, holding my basket tightly to keep a few pieces from falling out. We showed each other our haul, and as expected, I was the winner. Just one piece of candy ahead of Joyce. "Where's Roger?" I wondered. "He's probably off getting candy by himself somewhere," Kane joked, and we all burst into laughter. "Guys, let's go to that house at the end and ask for some candy," Joyce suggested. Kane and I looked toward the house, the flickering green light in the window resembling the cold, sharp eyes of a monster watching us. "But the old man in that house is really fierce," Kane hesitated. "That's right. We've never even talked to him." I guess that I shared the same thought as Kane. "What are we afraid of? It's Halloween. Trick or treat. We're in costumes, so no one will recognize us," Joyce persuaded. She ran toward the house at the end of the street like a pioneer. Kane and I took a few seconds to think before we followed her. That house truly felt like a completely different world in the neighborhood, always dark and mysterious. As we stepped into the yard, the musty smell and cold atmosphere made our footsteps slow down. All three of us exchanged uncertain glances, each of us thinking about backing out, but no one wanted to be the one to say it. By the time we reached the front door, there were no Halloween decorations at all, yet I still felt a chill run down my spine. Joyce's smile was stiff at that moment as she nervously pressed the doorbell.
Who?
The homeowner's voice was deep but oddly distorted. We jumped and huddled together, gripping our candy baskets tightly. Trick or treat. Joyce was on the verge of tears, looking even more frightened than Kane and me. The door opened a crack, and a hand reached out from inside, tossing 3 small black candy bags toward us. Kane and Joyce immediately ran away. I froze for a few seconds when I met the old man's cold, sharp gaze, accompanied by a squelching sound as if he was chewing on something. "Otis!" Joyce shouted loudly, startling me. I quickly said thank you and turned to run, just as I noticed the old man reaching out toward me. Reaching Kane's house was the nearest safe spot, and we breathed heavily while laughing with excitement. As we divided the old man's candy bags, all three of us eagerly anticipated trying them first. The moment I had been waiting for had finally arrived. Normally, my mom would never let me eat candy this late at night. "Mine is eyeball candy," I exclaimed, because it was my favorite treat in the world. I quickly popped the candy into my mouth and it tastes super terrible. I couldn't even chew that piece of candy. Looking at Joyce and Kane, they both had pale faces, staring intently at the candy bags. "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to keep the candy in my mouth. Joyce's candy bag fell from her hand, and a bunch of human fingers rolled out from inside. Kane also dropped his candy bag, and inside were ears and teeth. I felt like I was turning to stone, my whole body frozen in place. I desperately wanted to spit out this salty, fishy candy, but I couldn't open my mouth. Kane screamed at the top of his lungs with all his strength. Joyce fainted, and I couldn't stop vomiting. Because the black bag containing my candy was embroidered with the name Roger. Kane's parents rushed out, and the neighbors gathered around as well. Kane cried as he spoke, unable to control his words. I also fainted a few minutes later. I woke up in the hospital and saw Kane, Joyce, and my parents. As soon as I remembered that Halloween night, I began to vomit uncontrollably again. When I asked about Roger, Kane fell silent, while Joyce burst into tears. My parents said he had been digested, and the police had easily captured the perpetrator. He was mentally ill and would face appropriate punishment. So the candy I ate was an eye of... I was horrified and continued to throw up. After that tragic incident, Roger's family moved away, and I spent months in the hospital for psychological treatment. Thanks to Kane and Joyce being by my side, I gradually became more stable. We still celebrate Roger's birthday every year to remember our sweet, chubby friend. If that night Kane hadn't called and I hadn't run in time, I might have ended up like Roger. I'm Marcus, and my wife Stella. We live in Austin, Texas. We've been happily married for 10 years, got good jobs we both love, and a steady income. My wife and I have spent a ton of money over the years trying to find our little angel. We've been willing to try it all. The big hospitals, small clinics, and all the latest reproductive treatments. God must have seen how hard we tried, because after 4 years, Stella and I just broke down and hugged each other tight when we saw those 2 lines on the pregnancy test. But then, "Marcus!" Stella yelled, totally freaking out, and it made me jump. I looked around and couldn't find Stella. The bathroom light was on, and my wife was just crying her eyes out. I rushed into the bathroom, and my heart dropped when I saw Stella sitting on the floor in a pool of blood. So, that little angel was only with us for less than 2 months. "I didn't even get to find out the baby's gender yet," Stella said, crying and holding the ultrasound photo close. It was a huge shock for my wife and me, going from hope to happiness, and then suddenly crashing down to disappointment and sadness. After we lost our kid, Stella locked herself in her room all day, just crying and feeling miserable. She stopped taking care of herself and our family like she used to. Every time she got home from work, the whole gloomy vibe made me feel really suffocated. "Stella, how about we have a fun day out this weekend? Where do you want to go and what do you want to eat?" "Joy Toy, can you take me there?" Stella said with a straight face. Of course. I was a bit surprised, but honestly, I just wanted to make Stella feel better, so I was down to go wherever she wanted. On Saturday morning, Stella got all dressed up and put on some light makeup for our outing. Seeing my wife looking fresh and happy again made me really happy. We started to head out. 403 West 2nd Street. It's about a 30-minute drive from here, honey. Stella didn't say anything. She just stared out the window. It's been a while since we had a date, so I see you're all dressed up and wearing makeup, huh? I teased Stella a little. "No. I want to go see our kid." "What?" I said, turning to Stella, totally surprised. She didn't say anything more. I had a ton of questions buzzing around in my head, and they just kept piling up every minute until I got to the Joy Toy store. As soon as the car stopped, Stella jumped out and rushed into the store, totally ignoring me yelling after her. I quickly hopped out and dashed into the store, checking out the big, colorful space. "Stella! Stella, where are you?" I just yelled out. As I zipped along the toy shelves, I glanced around and suddenly got chills. The lullaby was soft and sad, kinda like a cold wind. It crept through the toys with big eyes and a smile, giving me the creeps. "Stella!" I yelled when I saw my wife holding a doll and softly singing a lullaby. I went to stop my wife because the other guests were giving her weird looks and whispering. "Stella, what are you doing?" I whispered. "Marcus, keep it down. Mikey's sleeping," my wife said, giving me a disapproving look. "What did you say? Mikey?" "Our son. Look," Stella said, holding the doll out to me. "He's got my eyes, right?" "Stella, stop. What are you doing?" My wife didn't even catch the end of what I said. She just hugged the doll and took off. I quickly ran to pay for it and then chased after her. From that moment on, my life officially turned into a total nightmare. Stella was happy and laughing again, but not with me. She was with her Mikey doll. Slowly but surely, my house got filled up with toys and boys' clothes in all shades of blue. One night, I turned to hug my wife, but in my dream, I just didn't feel her warmth next to me. A white figure with a creepy humming sound was swaying back and forth right in front of me. I freaked out, jumped up, screamed, and started frantically looking for the light switch. Turns out it was my wife. She was singing a lullaby to her little son. I felt totally helpless, and my heart was still racing with fear. For a bunch of nights in a row, I was always sleeping on edge, feeling panicky. That really messed with my nerves big time. Little by little, I started hearing kids crying and laughing, and the sounds of toys turning on. It felt like there was a real kid living in the house, even though I was all alone. Everywhere I looked, there were these colorful, cute toys with big round eyes that were dark and deep, and they totally creeped me out. I hated them. One time, I had just come home after work, and my wife was soothing the doll. And the creepiest part, it was crying. My head was spinning, and I opened my eyes wide to take in what was happening in front of me. My wife, looking totally out of it in panic, was trying to soothe this dirty, torn-up doll. I yelled loudly, tried to hold Stella down, shoved her in the back seat, and rushed her to the hospital. The days Stella was in the hospital were also my time to chill and recover. I called in the cleaning crew to tidy up the whole house, tossed out all the toys and kids' stuff, and painted the place a brighter color. Stella got some good therapy and started to chill out. She was dealing with the hurt of losing our kid again. But I felt good because I at least got her to come back. We slowly got past the hurt, got back to work, and started living our lives again, hoping a little angel would show up soon.
The clock on the dashboard read 2:17 a.m. It had been over 12 hours since I left Colorado, and still about 3 hours left before getting home to California. The week-long sales trip had left me exhausted, but I pushed myself to drive home instead of staying another night in a hotel. Sharon, my wife, and the kids were waiting. It had been 3 months since the company moved me to the traveling sales division. My time with my wife and kids was almost zero. My eyes drooped with fatigue. The radio played worn-out country songs I had heard hundreds of times on trips like this. I adjusted the window, letting the freezing autumn night air awaken my numb senses. In the car's headlights, the road stretched endlessly ahead, as if I were driving into a boundless tunnel. It was right then that I saw him. At first, it was just a faint, dark shape on the roadside, easily missed if I hadn't happened to glance to the right. A man, standing with his thumbs stuck out. Something about the man's posture, maybe the exhaustion evident in his slumped figure, made me hit the brakes. My old sedan slowly came to a stop, and I rolled down the passenger side window. "Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to make out his face in the dark. "Eastbound. Anywhere along the way is fine." His voice was strangely soft. I hesitated for a second. Even though I'd decided to stop, there was still a feeling of unease. But now, changing my mind and driving off would seem rude. "I'm heading to Cali. If you want to go that way, get in." The man got into the car, bringing with him a strange, indescribable smell. As he sat down, I noticed his clothes looked strangely clean, not like someone who had just been standing on the roadside in the middle of the night. "Thanks for stopping. Not many people do anymore." especially at this hour, he said as I started driving again. No problem. I'm Mark, I replied, trying to shake off the uncomfortable feeling. David, he said after a pause so long I thought he wouldn't answer. We drove in silence for a while. The radio played a sad Johnny Cash song about a man who lost everything. I glanced at David. In the dim light from the dashboard, I could see he was younger than I thought, early 30s maybe. His dark hair and dark eyes contrasted sharply with his pale skin. So where are you headed? I asked, trying to break the heavy silence. I'm not sure anymore. I've been traveling for a while now. It seems I can't find my way home. Are you lost? You could say that. He turned towards me and his gaze made me shiver. Do you ever feel like you're stuck, Mark? Like you're trapped in a single moment, and no matter how hard you try, you can't get out? The question caught me off guard. I'm not sure what you mean. I'm dead, Mark. I died and I can't move on, David said, his voice terrifyingly calm. My heart beat faster. I tried to laugh, but it sounded more like a wheeze. You're alive. Death isn't what people imagine. It's not an end. It's just a prolonged moment. And I'm stuck in my moment, he continued. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling my palms start to sweat. How do you need help? I asked cautiously, silently calculating the distance to the next town where I could find a way out of this situation. David looked out the window for a long time before answering. I don't know. I shifted in my seat, feeling uncomfortable. The car's heater was running full blast, but I still felt cold. You know, I used to be a salesman. Like you, David suddenly said. I flinched. How did you know I'm a salesman? The sample case. He pointed to the back seat where my leather briefcase containing product samples lay, and the roll of duct tape in the storage compartment. Classic signs of the trade. Oh, I exhaled, feeling slightly less tense. At least that was a logical explanation. Yeah, I sell medical equipment. What did you sell? Insurance, he said. Life insurance, actually. Kind of ironic, isn't it? Selling security to people afraid of death, then in the end, learning about it myself much sooner than planned. What happened to you, David? I asked, partly out of curiosity, partly to keep him talking. People usually don't cause trouble when they're talking. One night, just like this one, he began, his voice lowering. I was driving home after a long trip, tired, just like you, trying to get home early to see my wife. She was pregnant with our first child. I needed to stay awake, so I rolled down all the windows, cranked up the music, but my eyes were still heavy. Just for a minute, I thought. Just close my eyes for 1 minute. David paused, staring at some invisible point ahead. That's the moment I'm talking about. My eyelids closed. My car hit the median. Everything ended. My body tensed. His words hit too close to home. How many times had I driven tired like this, my own eyelids heavy, jolting awake when I felt the car drifting? You shouldn't tell me things like that while I'm driving, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. So, what happened next? I couldn't stop myself from asking, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Nothing. No light, no welcoming family. Just the feeling of eyelids closing, the car leaving the lane, knowing everything was about to end. I felt sick, not because of his story, though it was creepy enough, but because of the similarity between our experiences. I too had pushed myself to the limit too often for work, for the desire to get home to Sharon and the kids. Hey, Mark. David leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Do you want to know what death feels like? Before I could answer, he burst out laughing, a high-pitched cackle that made the hair on my neck stand up. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding in my chest. The car skidded on the pavement, tires screeching. Without thinking, I threw open the door and scrambled out, nearly tumbling onto the pavement. Behind me, The laughter continued, seeming to chase me through the darkness. And then, from ahead, blinding headlights appeared. A horn blared along with the screech of brakes. I stood there, frozen in the headlights. An ambulance stopped just inches in front of me. Two men in paramedic uniforms jumped out of the ambulance, their faces shocked. They approached me, eyes searching. "What are you doing out here in the middle of the highway at this hour?" There was a man in my car. David. He was saying strange things about death, I stammered, breathing heavily, heart still pounding in my chest. The two men exchanged glances. "You said David? Tall, thin, dark hair, about 30? I nodded. "How did you know?" "His full name is David Mercer, a patient at Riverside Psychiatric Center. He escaped yesterday." My body stiffened. A psychiatric patient? When asked about David's location, I turned, pointing back where I had abandoned the sedan, about half a mile away. I got into the ambulance, riding back to the car with the two paramedics. Noticing I was still quite shaken, the paramedic gave me a cup of water and a blanket. According to the paramedic, David could be very unstable. He suffered from severe psychosis, with hallucinations and delusions about death. The paramedic looked sad. "David used to be a long-haul driver like you. 2 years ago, he had a serious accident on this highway. His wife was pregnant, and he was trying to get home early." I felt a chill run through my body. So that was true? About his wife and child? Yes, that's the true part of his story. David suffered irreversible brain damage. When he woke up after a 3-month coma, he developed a strange form of psychosis. He believes he died in the accident. David no longer recognizes his wife and child. He's stuck in the moment before the crash. In his mind, his wife is still pregnant, and he's still trying to get home. The ambulance approached the spot where I had left the sedan. Through the window, I saw my car still parked crookedly on the shoulder, the driver's door wide open. When we stopped next to my car, one of the paramedics checked inside and confirmed no one was there. They helped me restart my car, advising me to stop at the nearest rest stop to rest. I nodded, feeling a deep gratitude when I thought about what could have happened. As I drove away, looking in the rearview mirror, I saw the ambulance turn around and continue their search. I took out my phone, called Sharon to let her know I'd be staying overnight at a rest stop and would be home early the next day. That night, lying in the motel room, staring at the ceiling, I thought about David and his fateful moment. I wondered how many other long-haul drivers had encountered him on that lonely road, and how many of them had been saved by his strange warning. I'm Ava, and I'm 16. It all started about 6 months after my family moved to this quiet neighborhood. My parents picked this place because it was known for being safe, having good schools, and a friendly community. Our next-door neighbor was Mrs. Allen, a middle-aged widow who seemed really polite. Her son, Joey, was my age. At first, Joey seemed like a normal kid, maybe a bit quiet and shy, but always polite when we bumped into each other. He usually wore big hoodies no matter the weather, and I rarely saw him with friends. My parents always said Joey was a good kid whenever they saw him helping his mom with yard work or carrying groceries inside. I can't say exactly when things started to get weird. Maybe it was the glances that lasted a little too long when we saw each other in the school parking lot. Joey always seemed to show up at the grocery store, the library, or the movie theater at the same time as me. At first, I tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence in a small town. I started to notice how Joey would change his schedule to walk to school at the same time as me. He always sat close enough to overhear my conversations in the cafeteria. His bedroom window always seemed to have a light on. Sometimes, I just felt like someone was watching me. My mom gently brushed off my concerns, saying, "You're at that age where everyone notices you. There's no need to overthink it." But I still felt uneasy, and that feeling wouldn't go away, which made me pretty stressed out. One night, my parents went to a company party and were coming home late so I was home alone. Rain started to fall outside, and the wind was pretty strong. Around midnight, I finished my essay and decided to go to bed. The house was strangely quiet. I was so tired that I fell asleep right away. I don't know how long I'd been asleep when I woke up. At first, there was nothing but the gentle ticking of the clock on the wall and the sound of rain outside. But then, I realized another sound, a very faint breathing. I opened my eyes wide, held my breath, and listened. And it was coming from under my bed. My body froze. A cold dread spread through me, from the top of my head to my toes. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Someone was under my bed. My heart hammered, and my brain frantically searched for a plan. I decided the best option was to keep pretending to be asleep while I figured out what to do. Trying my best to keep my breathing even, I let one hand drop naturally off the side of the bed, as if I was just rolling over in my sleep. And then, my fingers touched human hair. All pretense vanished. I shot upright and leaped out of bed, unable to stop the scream that ripped from my throat. At the same moment, a dark figure emerged from under the bed. It was Joey. He stood there in his familiar black hoodie, his eyes wide. In his hand was a knife. Time seemed to stand still for a few long seconds as we stared at each other. I grabbed my bedside lamp and hurled it straight at Joey. It missed him, but it created enough of a distraction for me to bolt for the door. I heard Joey stumble behind me, probably tripping over something in the dark. I ran downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear hurried footsteps chasing me. At the front door, I fumbled with the deadbolt, my trembling hands making the simple task difficult. Finally, the door swung open, and I ran to the nearest house with lights on, Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins' place down the street. I banged on the door frantically, yelling my name and begging for help. The door opened, and Mr. Jenkins' confused face appeared. I quickly explained everything, and Mr. Jenkins immediately called the police. My parents rushed home from their party. Police searched Mrs. Allen's house, and then, even more horrifying things were discovered. Joey hadn't just been watching me from afar. He had snuck into my room multiple times for months. His room was a chilling shrine dedicated to me. Hundreds of photos of me doing all sorts of activities were plastered all over the walls. In a journal, police found detailed entries about what Joey called observation nights. Nights when he hid under my bed and simply watched me sleep. He described the feeling of touching my hair, wrote about my scent, the sounds I made while sleeping, and times he rummaged through my belongings when I left the room. But the most terrifying part, the one that made even the police officers shiver, Joey had explicitly written, "Tonight will be different. Ava will be mine forever. We will always be together, in death." And he had brought the tools to carry out that plan. The knife I had seen, rope, duct tape, and a bottle of sleeping pills. During the interrogation, Joey confessed to all of it with a disturbing calmness. He said he had fallen in love with me the first day he saw me, that we belonged together, and if he couldn't have me, then no one could. He detailed how he broke into my house through a first-floor window I had forgotten to lock. More than a year after the incident, I still wake up every night, my heart pounding, imagining someone hiding under my bed. Joey is in a mental institution. My family moved to another city, but I know I'll never feel truly safe again. It's been almost a year since I last stepped into a McDonald's. It's not because the food is terrible or the experience was bad. It's because every time I see Ronald's curly red hair and wide grin on an advertisement, I find myself standing silently in a cemetery on a biting cold night in front of a small grave with the name Michael. I was 20 at the time, working as a mascot at McDonald's restaurants throughout Los Angeles. That evening, I had just finished my shift at a McDonald's branch. The other employees were cleaning up and getting ready to close. I was putting away a few items near the entrance, about to go change and head home when a woman appeared. She was middle-aged, thin, wearing a gray sweater. Her gray hair fell over her shoulders, and her sunken eyes looked directly at me. "Excuse me, we're about to close," I said, but she didn't move. Her eyes scrutinized me from head to toe. She said, "My son wants to meet Ronald." I looked at her suspiciously. She pulled out a $50 bill from her pocket. "Michael loves Ronald McDonald and wants to take a picture with him. I'll pay you extra for your time." $50 wasn't a small amount for me back then, and her eyes seemed so sincere. Plus, the job she was asking for wasn't difficult at all. "Where is Michael?" I asked. She smiled softly. "Just follow me." We walked to a car parked by the side of the road. She drove slowly, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. I tried to make conversation to break the silence. "How old is Michael?" 8 years old. He's very smart." I nodded, waiting for her to say more, but she just stayed silent. "When did Michael start liking Ronald McDonald?" "Since he was little. He always asked me when he would get to meet Ronald." I nodded, looking out the window and realizing we were driving through downtown. There were only a few sparse houses on either side of the road. A few minutes later, the car was still moving. "Are we almost there?" I asked when I realized we had already passed a residential area. "Almost," she smiled and said. I looked out the window, still not seeing our destination, so I asked again, "Where are we going?" She kept her stiff smile. "To Michael. He's waiting." The car turned into the cemetery gate. The night wind rustled through the dry branches, creating an eerie, chilling sound. I shivered. "Why are we here?" The woman stopped the car next to a small stone pathway, turned off the engine, and then turned to look at me. "Michael is here." I sat still for a moment, trying to comprehend the situation. She had opened her car door and was standing outside waiting for me. I hesitated but still got out of the car. We walked deeper into the cemetery. My shoes crunched on the gravel path, the sound echoing in the quiet night. Large tree shadows loomed on the ground like giant monsters. She walked softly, as if familiar with this path. I followed, my heart pounding. Finally, she stopped in front of a small grave. I looked down and read the deeply carved inscription, "Michael David Thompson, 2015 to 2024, beloved son." My whole body trembled. "He's been waiting for you for a very long time," she said, her voice gentle, as if talking to a living child. "Michael, this is Ronald." I stood there like a stone statue, looking down at the grave, then back at her. "Can you tell Michael a joke?" she asked me, her eyes looking down at the tombstone. I swallowed, my throat dry. I had taken her money. I could do this, just once. I stepped closer to Michael's grave. "Hey, Michael, Ronald has a joke for you. Why did the chicken cross the road?" I paused, waiting. In that silent moment, I heard the giggle of a child. I was a little surprised by the laughter. It was the woman laughing, her eyes fixed on the tombstone. The laughter came from her, but the tone was completely different. It sounded like the joyful giggle of a 9-year-old child. "Why, Ronald?" she said in a childlike voice, her head tilted slightly. I felt frozen, but I still answered, To get to the other side." The childlike laughter rang out again, but this time I clearly saw her eyes. In them, there wasn't just madness, but also the pain of a mother who had lost her child. A few seconds later, she stopped laughing, her eyes returning to their former state. "Michael wants to take a picture with Ronald." She took out a camera. I looked at the grave, then at her. I felt an invisible hand squeezing my throat. I stood up, backed away. I can't." The smile on her face slowly faded. She looked at me with a bewildered expression. "Why not?" I quickly took out the $50 bill and handed it back to her. "I'm sorry, I have to go." I turned and walked quickly towards the exit. Behind me, the woman suddenly burst into loud sobs, tearing through the silence of the night. "Michael, Mom is so sorry." I ran like the wind towards the cemetery gate. Her cries still echoed behind me. I didn't dare look back. I ran until I couldn't hear her cries anymore. I walked all night to get home, still wearing my Ronald McDonald suit. My shirt was soaked with sweat. The next morning, I called my job and quit. I couldn't explain to my boss why, just that I didn't want to dress up as Ronald McDonald anymore. Years have passed, and sometimes I still remember that night. I vividly remember the woman's laughter and her cries. Perhaps I was too cowardly to run away. I could have stayed, taken a picture, and offered some comforting words to that grieving mother. If I had been more careful when choosing a place to live that day, I probably wouldn't have woken up on an operating table. It started 3 months ago when I decided to leave Cleveland, Ohio. My job had fallen apart, and my rent was piling up. I needed a fresh start somewhere with a lower cost of living. Dayton seemed like a good fit. It was a quiet city, and still in the same state, so I could visit family. The first thing I needed to do was find a place to live. I scrolled through apartment and rental pages, and most of them were out of my reach. Then I saw a post looking for a roommate. It was a 2-bedroom apartment on Oak Street, near downtown, with a rent that was half the average price. The apartment currently had one occupant, a guy named Vince, who made the post. We exchanged a few simple messages, and I quickly moved in with him. On moving day, I parked my rental truck in front of a 3-story red brick building. The apartment was on the 2nd floor. Vince opened the door after the first knock. He was tall and thin with long brown hair that almost covered his eyes. The first thing that struck me was Vince's unusually wide smile. His voice was a little high-pitched and slightly shaky. His hand was cold and clammy when we shook hands. Vince didn't say much about himself, and I was hesitant to ask. The apartment was bigger than I expected. A large living room with a window overlooking the street. The kitchen was small but functional. My bedroom had a single bed and a wardrobe. There was a faint, musty, foul smell. I figured it was because the room hadn't been used. The first few days passed quite peacefully. I worked the afternoon and evening shift at a restaurant near downtown, usually getting home around 11 p.m. Vince was usually in his room with the door closed. The musty, foul odor I noticed at first didn't go away. It became more and more pronounced. I opened the windows and lit scented candles, but it didn't help. The smell was especially strong near Vince's room. On a day off when Vince was also home, I couldn't stand the smell anymore, so I asked him about it. Vince, who was in the kitchen, turned back with that familiar smile and explained that he was working on a dissection research project on small animals, like rats and birds. He wanted to understand their internal structure. Better rats than people, right? Vince chuckled softly and walked into his room. I stood there watching him go, thinking my roommate was incredibly strange. After living with Vince for almost a month, I decided to find another place. I had saved enough money for a security deposit. I told Vince about it, and he didn't say anything, but he did mention he was going home to visit his family that weekend. I figured he wasn't happy about me moving out, so I just kept quiet. I breathed a sigh of relief, finally getting a quiet night to myself. That evening, as I was sitting on the sofa, I was startled by a sound at the front door. I turned off the TV and listened. It was a key turning in the lock. Maybe Vince had come home early. I stood up, ready to greet him. The door opened, but instead of Vince, I saw a tall, dark figure in a hoodie, his face covered by a white mask. Before I could react, he lunged. I tried to run to the kitchen, but my foot caught the edge of the table, and I tumbled to the floor. In the next second, a strong blow to my head sent me into darkness. When I woke up, I found myself tied tightly to a metal table. I was in a small room with no windows, lit by a single overhead bulb. The concrete walls were bare and damp. The stench was so overwhelming it made me want to throw up. Around the table were metal shelves full of glass jars. Inside were dark brown fragments, suspended in a clear fluid. On another table, I saw surgical tools, scalpels, pliers, scissors. My mouth was taped shut, leaving me to only make muffled sounds of helplessness. From a dark corner, a voice began to hum a sweet melody that, in this context, was horrifying. The singer emerged from the shadows and walked closer. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Vince with his familiar smile. But this time, it was more grotesque, with wide, bulging eyes filled with a look of sheer delight. Better people than rats, right, Mike? Without a word, he picked up a folding knife from the tool table and opened it. Vince placed the tip of the blade on the skin of my stomach. I tensed, struggling in desperation. The blade began to cut into my skin, and a searing pain hit me, feeling the warm blood ooze out. I was helpless, and so desperate I started to cry. Suddenly, I felt the rope on my right wrist loosen slightly, probably because I was sweating so much. I tried to twist my wrist. Vince had turned away to grab a tool, mumbling something about a perfect specimen. After a few minutes of struggling, my right hand finally came free. I immediately sat up, grabbed a knife from the tool table, and stabbed him in the shoulder. Vince screamed, stumbling backward, clutching his shoulder. He became enraged at the sight of his own blood, yelling hysterically. I quickly untied myself and ran. After I got out, I realized that the horror room was Vince's bedroom. I pressed hard on the wound to stop the bleeding, staggering down the deserted street. I saw a light at a nearby house and crawled toward it. I pounded on the door. A middle-aged woman opened it. She was in a panic when she saw my state. "Please, call the police." I managed to give her my apartment address before collapsing. I woke up in the hospital. A police detective was sitting next to my bed. He told me Vince had been arrested. In the basement, they found more than 20 glass jars containing body parts. Not just from animals. They believed some were human, as they also found photos. Some of them were of victims who had gone missing several years ago. According to forensic reports and medical records, Vince had been diagnosed with paranoid disorder and dissociative personality disorder, but he had never followed through with treatment. He was reclusive, rarely socialized, and had a tendency to become obsessed with human anatomy and controlling others' bodies. The untreated mental illness was the cause of his insane behavior and horrifying crimes. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. My wound wasn't deep, but I lost a lot of blood and needed time to recover psychologically. After being discharged, I found a new place to live. This time, I was much more careful. I met the landlord in person, checked all the paperwork, and talked to the neighbors before making a decision. Vincent Miller was sentenced to life in prison without parole. During the trial, he still had that grotesque smile, as if the whole thing was just an interesting game. I know I was lucky that I didn't become the next living specimen in his horrifying collection.
Thank you for watching until the end. As mentioned earlier, our goal of reaching 50,000 subscribers in 2026 is still ongoing. If you enjoy these stories, please give us a hand and support us.